Hello there, everyone. Thank you for joining. I am Kelly Froyo. I'm IAYT's membership coordinator. And today I am joined by IAYT's marketing and communications manager, Marita Greenidge, and our special guest, Bija Bennett, who is the chair of the Global Wellness Institute's Yoga Therapy Initiative. And whether you're joining us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram, we're just really, really happy to have you here. We see the likes coming in, so thank you. We are going to start. I'll start us off by just doing a brief centering. This is a tradition that we do at the beginning of IAYT meetings to clear our minds and help get us in the right headspace to have a good conversation. So if you're watching along with us, I invite you to soften your gaze or close your eyes. If you're seated, feel your body anchoring into the seat, maybe your feet pressing into the floor, spine lengthening, crown of your head reaching towards the sky. Notice your breath. As you tune into your breath, allow your thoughts to start to quiet. Allow the chatter to turn down just a bit. Coming back to your own center, your own sense of peace, calm, and well-being. Take a moment to enjoy that feeling that is uniquely you, your authentic self. And on your next breath, you can begin to flutter the eyes open, and we'll come back together here. Thank you.
Thank you. That was lovely, Kelly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So as I mentioned before, Marita and I are really thrilled to have our guest Bija Bennett here. She is a member of IAYT. She's an IAYT certified yoga therapist, or CIAYT. She's an author and speaker, as well as chair of the Global Wellness Institute's Yoga Therapy Initiative. And their mission is to educate the public on yoga therapy as a legitimate, evidence-backed, and accessible health modality. And today we'll be discussing yoga therapy in the global wellness economy. So Bija,
yes,
we're really delighted
so
to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me. This is exciting. Yes.
Very happy. Can you tell us, to get started, just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your pathway to this place you call the intersection between wellness and yoga. We love to hear your personal story.
Well, surprisingly, it all started with rock and roll. So when I was a teenager, and in the late 60s, I started an all-girl rock band called The Shape. And we were greatly influenced by the Beatles. And I was, of course, lead singer and rhythm guitar, but especially George Harrison, who was and became a mentor to me, and I, eventually taught him yoga therapy. I became a yoga therapist, which is extraordinary. But through that process, I was interested in Eastern philosophy and psychology, and I received my bachelor's and master's degree at UCLA, and I studied Indian music and literature and contemporary, comparative religions and dance and the arts. And I also started transcendental meditation. So that kind of became my first inroad, I guess you could say, to yoga. And I started meditating on a regular basis, and I've been doing that ever since. But I think it was interesting, going back to the Beatles, I might say, is how that person, George Harrison, kind of helped, influence me so much. And I started only later on realizing that. But that's how I began kind of this path, I guess you could say, of spirituality and yoga and my interest in meditation and onward. I think after that, my other mentor was Deepak Chopra. So after college, I became, interested in, continued the path of teaching yoga, actually, and doing meditation. And I met Dr. Chopra when he was the chief of staff of New England Memorial Hospital outside of Boston. But he was asked by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi to be the medical director of this new Ayurvedic medical center outside of Boston, where they were combining Western medical approaches to health and the Eastern Ayurvedic approaches. And when I met him, I was so kind of, I think, just amazed at him. He had kind of an aura about him, or a charisma. And I asked him if I could join his team. And, I'm kind of missing all the other things. I got married and then had a stepdaughter and things like that in, a normal life. But he gave me the opportunity of a lifetime. And my life changed after that. It was extraordinary because he asked me to be the yoga therapist there. And this was before yoga therapy or certifications were happening. And I had the opportunity to work with all sorts of people, from cancer patients, children, seniors, people with physical challenges, athletes, celebrities. And I even had the opportunity to work with my father, who had spinal problems. And his neurologist said that these were the best exercises for the spine that he had ever seen. At that time, I met my teacher, TKV Desikachar, through Dr. Larry Payne, which you all know. And it really changed because it was the first time in my life that I encountered a yoga that had a step-by-step program for developing the complete human being. And that's kind of my path. And it kind of then went further. But Deepak, George Harrison, and that's where I started working as a yoga therapist, you could say. And, seeing how extraordinary these tools of yoga are for, healing any kind of a human being, depending on their needs. I had the ability to access medical files and learn pulse diagnosis and talk with nurses and Dr. Chopra, and being guided that way. And through my knowledge of Vinaya Yoga, as I began to learn and work with people, that was really my beginning of my career, I guess you could say, and my interest in these deep, deep practices of yoga and yoga therapy.
Very cool. Oh my goodness. I love hearing that. And I love hearing, that your path is very unique. And I think that, perhaps not a lot of people get today such uniqueness. Everybody does have a unique path, but now there are, if someone really wants to, there's tracks for becoming a yoga therapist. There are trainings that you can just enroll in and take, and the path is much more clear cut now. So you really are a true pioneer in this field. Very, very cool to hear.
It's fascinating. I think what Deepak inspired me to do, and through my relationship with him, is, he inspired me to write about yoga. He inspired me he put me on stage to co-teach some of his seminars to large groups of people. And I think what was important that he was able to do, and he still does, is to take esoteric principles and knowledge and practices and be able to make them accessible for other people, especially the general public. And the other thing is I'd say this was more Desikachar, because I felt that Vini Yoga allowed me to be creative with both my practice and the way I was teaching. But, these opportunities came, and I took them because they seemed to be, the most exciting and creative project at the time. I mean, I'd love to share one of them. Through Deepak, actually, I had the opportunity I was asked to actually write a book because someone saw me on stage, one of his publishers, and asked me, did I know, anything about the relationship between yoga and emotions? That was not something I, had, training in, but I kind of explored this further. And from that, it took 4 years, I wrote a book called Emotional Yoga. And it was about emotional awareness using, the 8 limbs of yoga was the model for me, and just my experiences in my own life about, through my relationships and my need to understand my emotions more and to be able to access them. And I, even with what you did, Kelly, at the beginning, these practices help us access, they're very powerful. And you can access if you put your attention in a particular way or ask, certain kinds of inquiry about how you feel. Gary said something. Gary Crasso is also my teacher, along with Desikachar. Gary really brought it alive for me, I guess you could say. And, I followed him all over the United States, trying to learn from him before he was even teaching the American Vini Yoga Institute. But he would say these things. One of the things he said is, true strength is getting along with your mother. And, and I had some challenges there myself, but I think what he meant was, it's more than just jumping around and sweating. You need to have some self-inquiry. If you felt angry or something she said or anyone says, you can take a moment and reflect. Or if you weren't able to take that moment then, you can do it in a practice later. And it just gave me insight into my own life. And once you have that, you can have greater, perhaps, insight in other people and at least more sensitivity, which is what I think yoga therapy is about. But, I'm when you asked, my path of yoga therapy, it really was not a straight line. It was many different things, because from my experience with Deepak and publishing a book, Emotional Yoga, I was asked to do a yoga program at a hotel in Colorado. Someone said, I just saw your book. We're doing a yoga program at a hotel, and would you like to author a specialized program, a unique program? I went to Gary and I talked to him about it. And he said, well, if we're going to do a program for one hotel, why don't we do it for many? So we started to put our minds together, and basically about a year later, we were able to co-brand, I'd say, the first yoga program for the spa and hospitality industries. And we created the company Yoga Away. And we co-partnered with Global Hyatt Corporation. This was before streaming videos. And I had a big desire, coming from my dance and theater background, to do yoga videos, and especially those within the Vini Yoga tradition, or the Vini Yoga style, I guess you could say. And so we had the opportunity to do that. We trained teachers. We created, mats, bags, DVDs, and these actually were on all the hotel channels for about 3,000 hotels in the United States and some globally. So I feel, that was one way of, of course, these things didn't just happen. it took interest, of course, and focus, and a lot of time, and sometimes money. But, it allowed to take my passion, which I encourage all of you, and take it into a creative process, if that makes sense. So I mean, that would be fun to talk a little bit more about if the audience might be interested. But I just think that's part of what also drew me into the spa industry and what brought me to the Global Wellness Institute.
Wow, that's that's so fascinating, Bija. And similar to what Kelly mentioned, what I love about you is that you are so multifaceted. Like, you are not just a yoga therapist, but you are also in the arts. You're doing film. You are like an author. Like, how do you think that all of these pieces came together to really help you like shape your career? And the reason I ask this as well is because like sometimes we think that we need to be one thing, but you are like just embracing all that you are, which I think is very yoga. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
I really appreciate that. I have a lot of Vata Pitta from the Ayurvedic. I move a lot. And I also have a lot of ideas, some of which happen and some don't. Sometimes I wonder, what am I here to do? But I think, the real thing is to be able to share with people, to connect with people. And that's what I learned from Desikachar, that yoga is the ability to link. It means to link to something. We're doing a yoga experience now by creating a conversation. It's a meditation of sorts. And I don't know, maybe it's that I said yes to things that were there in front of me. And I, of course, had other colleagues that I talked to about that were willing, I guess, to take the creative step a little bit further. And I think that's what happened. It's hard to know what caused it, but because my interests are so much, and I'm working with that now, how do you bring that all in and focus at the same time? And I think one of the things that happened through the spa industry, so the Global Wellness Summit, so through Yoga Away was part of the Hyatt Hotels spa, not just, well, it was a hospitality Yoga Away. We were really the first yoga program that kind of was embraced by hospitality group. I still don't think, even though we kind of ended our relationship with them in, like 2010 or so, I still have not seen this kind of program at a hotel. But that the person that was connected with us, that connected us with Hyatt, was the vice president of spas globally for Hyatt Hotels. And because of him, I started to go to these conferences, the International Spa Association. And in 2000, maybe 5, I was invited to attend this new summit, and it was called the Global Spa Summit. And it was in New York. And Susie Ellis and her then husband, Pete, started this. And, it was big business back then. And I didn't know that much about the spa industry. And so she started this where leaders would come together and share information and network. And so this was something I'd never done before. Also, iSpa, we had a booth there. And I remember Jim Root, who was the head of iSpa at the time, said, "This is the most innovative thing I've seen at iSpa." We had a little teeny booth, and there were all these like glamorous booths with, skincare and all of that. But it was the idea, I think, behind it. And people hadn't seen yoga that way before. And by the way, it wasn't just yoga. We connected it to the needs of the person that was coming into a hotel, for example. You've traveled all day, you're stressed out. What do? You do a program for stress reduction. You could just turn the TV on and do something for that. So we designed a stress reduction program. We designed one for working out, for mental focus, using certain technologies, and one for sleep that we did. They're all still on my website for free. So I encourage you to go see. And I edited them. Now there are about 70 videos that are all taken from those videos on bijab.com. But coming back to the Global Spa Summit, it became finally the Global Wellness Summit. And again, it was leaders of that were trying to define something called the wellness economy. And I really believe that Susie and this group were the first ones to define the global wellness, economy. And from that, she believed that there should be a research component to it, and begin to, show that there's evidence these practices, massage, acupuncture, sound, all these kinds of things, yoga, had, a scientific basis to it, that, that there was evidence that these things worked. And that's how she started the Global Wellness Institute. And that was really cool, except I started to feel kind of disillusioned with it from the perspective of yoga, because I felt that while the wellness industry was developing and elevating itself and becoming more sophisticated, the way that people saw and at least talked about yoga was very superficial. It was not, the yoga remained the same when these practices and massage therapies and the technologies that began to come into the spa industry at the time, they became more sophisticated. I guess you could call them the hard care, but the soft care of these programs that spas offered, especially in yoga. I mean, there weren't even yoga rooms then in the spas. There were exercise rooms. Then there became yoga rooms, but yoga was still considered an exercise program. So I said to Susie, the wellness industry really doesn't understand. I feel that it's somewhat superficial. The wellness industry doesn't understand really what the value of yoga is. And she said, well, why don't you start an initiative? So that's how I got involved with the Global Wellness Institute. It started the Global Wellness Institute Yoga Therapy Initiative with the idea of kind of showing the spa and hospitality industry, showing the wellness industry that there's this extraordinary depth of knowledge, and that there is something called yoga therapy that, especially in the spa and health and hospitality industries, is very important right now to deal with the conditions and the needs of human beings. So that's how I got involved with, this particular key initiative that we've been working on for many, many years. And I asked Felicia Tomasco, hopefully she's listening today. She is known quite a bit at IYT, and she is my vice chair. And together we began thinking about how we are going to enlighten the wellness community about the value of yoga and yoga therapy. More to come.
Do you want to tell us about some of the key initiatives and projects that you are working on within the Yoga Therapy Initiative? Tell us a little more in depth.
Well, I would love to. We spent so we've been doing this for about 3 years, and we had weekly meetings. And we began to develop, first of all, the initiative itself, and ask certain members. Gary Krafso's on. We have Ganesh Mohan, who's speaking at the Sitar event this year, Felicia, Dawn Miller, I mean, quite a few people. And, we had meetings and such, and the Global Wellness Institute likes to have initiatives. Now, GWI is a nonprofit organization. So all of the research and initiatives and work that they do are given to the public for free, which is quite wonderful. They also publish reports on the state of the various industries. And we felt that we needed to publish something. And of course, I have this background. Felicia has this background. And so we decided we were going to create a white paper. That was our initial thought. And we wanted to, talk about the industry of yoga therapy. What happened at the beginning was, as we began to start to kind of put this idea together for this white paper or book, we realized that people did not understand that there was a difference or the distinction between yoga and yoga therapy. And Susie encouraged us, Susie Ellis from Global Wellness. So there's a Global Wellness Summit, which is a for-profit yearly event summit that people come and talk about trends in the wellness economy and the wellness industry. And the GWI is the educational component of the Global Wellness Summit. So we realized that we had to really write clearly the distinction between yoga and yoga therapy. So that became part of this report. And this report we now have a 108-page report on the state of the industry of yoga therapy. And I was really pleased to be able to share this with the listeners today, because it really talks about the exponential growth of yoga worldwide, especially after COVID, which was pretty extraordinary, and social media and the impact of that, and the advantages in health and business and travel. Then the evolution of yoga and yoga therapy, where did it come from? What is the distinction between yoga and yoga therapy? The model, the whole health, Panchamaya model of yoga therapy, and the 5 dimensions of the human system. This is really the first, I guess you could say, the first model of self-care in the world. It's thousands of years old, and it's an extraordinary model to understand. And the yogis, medicine men and women who discovered this and put these models together, I mean, it was really designed to help human suffering and to help the needs of individuals through millennia. And it's especially important for today, when there's loneliness and the mental health crisis and so much stress. And, we're being bombarded all over the place with so much material that's taking our attention away. So these practices, this model, these resources are really important. I know I'm just kind of speaking to everybody who knows this, but then we talked about the profession of yoga therapy, and then collaborative partnerships in yoga therapy in the book across industries, in education, medical settings, workplace wellness, travel, hospitality. And then, we kind of ask for advocacy, because that's really what we're doing. I'd say we are yoga advocates, yoga therapy advocates right now. But what I want to say is that I want to give this to everybody, anyone who's listening, members of IAYT, because you can use this book for, and this report, I guess you could say, for helping you get a job, working with your employer or boss, no matter if you're with an insurance agency. If you want to bring in yoga therapy, you can use this to help describe what it really is. And then what how you can do some of these things that are described in the report. So that's really why we did this. And it just came out really a couple of months ago. So I'm also looking for ideas and people who would be interested in helping us share this worldwide.
what came up for me, Bija, as you were discussing, and you're mentioning the book you just created, but I'm also thinking about your path as well. And what stands out for me is that there has been a lot of collaboration, with people in different professions and spaces. And I wanted to know if you could give some advice to yoga therapists about how they can effectively collaborate with other healthcare professionals or institutions to really help promote these holistic approaches to health and well-being.
Oh, that's a really great question. I I think get comfortable with and embrace networking. Seriously, I started to go to various conferences. How would I have ever gotten, as a yoga person and working with Dr. Chopra, to go into the spa industry? It just came up. And so I went to that conference. I'm starting to go to real estate and wellness symposiums and seeing, how a yoga therapist could even be a consultant with an architectural firm or, I'm put my thinking cap on, but it's mostly meeting people. Because when you meet somebody and you tell them what you do and kind of think of it in a larger sense of what you really do, how it could perhaps, if you're interested, fit into this modality or fit into this industry. So that's number one. I think I got this from my father. He, is very much, I was shy, believe it or not, growing up. Then, I was pushed into being on stage, and then I could sing. And then I studied dance and I could move, but then I couldn't put the two together. It was Dr. Chopra who allowed me to be on stage and to kind of try to integrate all this. But I really think, that, looking around you and seeing, it comes from my interests, maybe I could say, Marita, and if my interests are, speaking to a group of musicians who may need to reduce their levels of stress or sleep better or, focus before getting up on stage, you have the tools. You could work with these people if that's what you're interested in. Because yoga is kind of this bigger, all-encompassing model of the whole human being. And so, I don't know, maybe it's just that I still am trying to do this, seeing what are your interests and where does this fit in, or does it, or how you could come into, I met the head of the YMCA recently in Chicago, and she wanted to talk to me about this. Think of how you could, help young kids from all walks of life through some of the trainings that you have and some of the beautiful programs and experiences and meditations and movement. So I don't know if that answered your question, but it's just really being open to collaborating with others and, to maybe have a knowledge of a desire to have an impact in the world. And I think I've somehow developed that and developed the confidence through my own yoga therapy, my own practice, to develop the confidence to be able to say, meet someone from Africa. We're working with Yoga Experiences Africa, we have someone now who's an initiative member who's created a platform for yoga teachers in Africa. I find that extraordinary. I would want to do anything to help her and to help educate. And then maybe the last thing I want to say is we need you. I would love anyone interested in joining the initiative, come giving us your ideas, helping be part of a team that we can, create these initiatives worldwide and spread the word of yoga. I think it's a fun thing to do, and it's a very fulfilling thing to do as well.
Bija, do you have the website or contact info for people to get involved? I will put in the chat here.
Yes, it's bijab.com, BIJAB. yoga.com. You can download the book for free.
Mhm.
Take it, use it. It's your resource. It was really done out of, in a philanthropic way. It doesn't teach yoga therapy, but it gives you the platform through which you can then take your knowledge and, use it, perhaps to kind of get you in the door. It's a real good, resource is all I can say that can help you.
Mhm.
You want to have something, to say what I used to think that if I said the word yoga, everybody would go, oh yeah, yoga, and I know what that is, but they don't. They really don't know the depth and the breadth of this profound teaching that, can be used in so many different ways. And that's what's exciting for me. It's kind of been like my, the basis of my whole life, I guess you could say, the ground through which, without even using the word, it's there. It's about relationships. That's what Desikachar said. Yoga is relationships, and relationships are yoga. And if your relationships aren't good, you should look at your yoga.
Bijou, I'm really connecting with what you're saying here. And I feel like this is so very useful, especially for persons coming out of like a yoga therapy program, because I feel like, not that it's not useful for people who have been yoga therapists for a while, but I feel like sometimes it's like, what do I do next? And
Yes.
I feel like that mentioning of networking or having like this practical tool here that you have created, that can really help you to determine what's going to be my next stage, and then doing a little bit of introspection and kind of figuring out, what do I connect with, what are my passions, where are my interests, and then blending these all together. Like I think this is,
why not? I mean,
this is wonderful.
Doing a film, doing a podcast. I would like to start a podcast. You're inspiring me to do this. And because they're exciting subjects, but a lot of people talk about a lot of things. I think what's cool is to have this depth of experience, whatever we want to call it, the ability to turn deeply inside and to access this possibility from consciousness. That's what we're given, and through all these practices that we've had. So, and then you can share this with so many kinds of people. That's why I think, let's take our blinders off. Not that anyone has them, but instead of a narrow view. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with being a yoga therapist and trying to get clients and, doing that in a particular situation through healthcare or through a chiropractic or doctor's office. Those are important too. But then see, how can you inspire people through your stories? And, and take your passions and your creativity. I think it's really the creativity part, and linking it with, it's your relationship with all of these things, but bringing your yoga to them. Because you are your yoga. That's you.
Yes, I am listening to you, and the word that's coming up for me is possibilities. Like I listen to you and I'm thinking, oh, and I know what you said about, like, you don't have to have the blinkers, but it's almost like some out of the box thinking, it's like, oh, it's like, oh, I'm sure someone is listening here and they're like, oh, maybe I never thought of like spa or film or something, and you are just broadening these possibilities, and I love it.
Thank you. And writing about it too. I've had the opportunity to write for Rolling Stone magazine. I actually
Going
wrote
back to your love of rock and roll.
I wrote an article on George Harrison, and I talked about how his humbleness, humility, and his spirituality, and his activism really influenced me. I mean, he was one of the first who brought, concert for the Bangladesh. He was the first to bring musicians together for a world need. And I think we can do that with yoga. I think, we need to start thinking creatively of what we can do for International Yoga Day and, have these performances and spaces and get people together and teach. And I mean, maybe it's being done, probably, but certainly, through GWI, they've allowed the opportunity to be creative with whatever we're doing to be able to share it worldwide. And I also think IIYT is a very powerful organization because you're keeping the profession alive, and it's the legacy of all of these teachers. For so long, I think the first thing we wrote is, that this book, for sure, and in some ways, parts of my life, are dedicated to all yoga teachers, past and present, who have preserved the integrity of the yoga tradition throughout generations, and who have continually inspired us to be students of yoga. And that we don't want to forget. There's a whole lineage of teachers and masters and, great individuals, men and women and all genders, that really kept the precious knowledge alive so that we could experience it. So that's part of it also, I think, is very, very important. You don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
That's, even with the creativity, we wanted to make sure that we, that we preserved the actual teaching itself. But yet you can be creative with it. So that's my inspirational message for the day for everyone. But please, I would love to hear from you, and we would love for you to join us in, our exploration and our activism, bringing yoga and yoga therapy worldwide.
Well said, Bija.
Thank
And
you.
I am going to, before we wrap up here, I'm going to address a question that came up from Facebook. How is yoga therapy integrating with mental health work, bringing somatic psychology awareness closer to mental health? I'm going to answer that really briefly, and then I'm going to allow Bija or Marita to chime in as well. But about within IIYT, about 25 to 35% of our certified yoga therapists are dual credentialed within another health modality. A lot of them are mental health workers in some way, shape, or form, psychologists, psychiatrists, licensed mental health counselors, social workers. And that just pairs really, really well with yoga therapy in their own practice, and also as a referral network for, and that goes back to networking too. If you're networking with other healthcare providers and they understand what you do, how you work as a yoga therapist, they are going to be more likely to refer to you, and also for you to refer with them, establishing that relationship so that when you might, as a yoga therapist, encounter a client that has things that need to be addressed by a mental health worker that fall outside of the yoga therapy scope of practice, you would refer back to them. Do either of you want to build on that or add to that?
I'm going to let Bija go first.
This is a really good question, because it's one of the most important things happening in our world today, for many different reasons, COVID being one of them, and the loneliness epidemic and things like that. I truly believe that our knowledge, especially through the Ayurvedic models and through our yoga therapy models, it's a different understanding than the Western psychological models of mental health and understanding the mind. Excuse me. But that's why the collaboration between the two are so important. We have some case studies in our report here, and one of them, there's really no asana practice. It's a lot about cooking, because this particular person was lonely, not seeing her family, loved to cook, started creating certain kinds of habits that weren't doing well for her. And through kind of a turnaround or looking at, a lifestyle. I mean, we're not dealing with someone who's psychotic or something like that. That is definitely something where Western medicine and psychologists and psychiatrists need to be brought in. But some of these, situations, and so the practice became, creating a dinner for her family once a week, and part of the week was planning that particular thing, doing a program first, a yoga therapy program first, taking a walk, going to the market, picking out the things, coming back. You don't think this is yoga therapy, but through a few weeks, she started to change her lifestyle and became happier. She went to bed earlier. She woke up earlier. I mean, this was part of her practice that the yoga therapist gave, and also was able to, share with her family her skill of cooking during the week. And she wasn't tired, and the family came, and it was just an extraordinary kind of change that happened. I also remember Desikachar saying, I mean, these are really yoga, that there was a young girl who wasn't doing well in school, and she was anxious and this, and he told her family to go buy her a goldfish. She had finally something to take care of, and she had a connection with that. And that, along with some other things, I know that sounds so possibly crazy, but these are real life situations where the practices don't have to necessarily be postures. They could be creative. We're talking about art. And actually, Desikachar told me I was taking pictures. He said, you should do that. That would be a very good hobby for you. Because, if attention goes all over, what if you had a camera and you were trying to focus on a particular detail? It slowed me down. And so I don't know if that answered the question, but I really feel that yoga therapists, people don't understand what yoga therapy really is, and the impact that a yoga therapist can have in these, health issues and challenges right now. I think we are needed more than ever in association with other healthcare providers, because we can't really diagnose a situation. That's just not part of our protocol. But I think we are so wise as yoga therapists, and we can bring that in. And I think I encourage more people to be focused on that. Even in the spa and the hospitality industries, that's what people are coming for. They're stressed out, they're not sleeping well, there's more to it than that. But you have to find that out through your assessment process. So
I'm
now,
so
Marika, you were going to say something too.
Because I am so glad I let you go next, because everything you said kind of leads into what it is that I wanted to say as well. And I know that the person would have asked specifically about mental health, and Kelly, you would have talked about this integration and collaboration with other professionals, and Bija, you expanded upon that as well. And I think that that's very important, going all the way back through like your life. It's like taking yoga therapy out to these spaces. This is what it is. When you talk about going with the art, going with the film, going with rock and roll, people don't understand what yoga therapy is. But when we go out into these spaces, it helps, and we have these collaborations. It helps people to understand what yoga therapy is. As you were telling your story, I was thinking to myself about gardening. Gardening is therapy for me. That's my therapy there. I get to, I'm like, I'm pitta vata, like you, right? And I need to slow down, and when I go and I do my gardening, I get to do that. What about if I took yoga therapy out there to a bunch of gardeners, a gardening group?
I love this.
So as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about the integration of yoga therapy in all of these different spaces, and this is where the networking and everything comes in. So it's just beautiful how all of that just came together.
I love it. And then write about it too, because
Yes.
the more that people see how this fits into so many things, hopefully it will, broaden their understanding of what it really is. And maybe that be something I'm interested in and trying to find a yoga therapist to work with. I mean, that's the joy of all of this. And that was a very good question and an extremely important one for our times right now, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, Bija,
Yes.
we're just about out of time here, and I wanted to thank you again for coming. We're so very grateful to have you here, and we had an amazing talk. Marita, would you like to say anything else, either of you, before we go, and would someone like to offer to close us out with another breath or an om?
I can close that with an, or maybe you can do it, Bija. I feel like you
No,
should
you
close
do it. I don't know.
I'll do it. I'll do
Bija, you like to sing.
I'll sing with you.
it. Okay, well, before we go, I really also want to join Kelly here with just thanking you for joining us today. This was such an interesting and insightful discussion. For me too. I'm here listening. Sometimes you don't know how everything will go, and this was also broadening my mind as well as I listen. And I'm in a yoga therapy program right now, so it is really interesting listening to you. So thank you so much for that. I want to invite anyone who's here listening to us right now to feel free to connect. I know that you're probably on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, but you can connect with us as well via email. We send out a lot of useful information, and you can access by going to iayt.org. You can just sign up for our email address. You don't have to be a member to get access to our email. So I encourage you to stay connected with us and look out for more of these streams. We're going to be doing quite a lot more of these, and I'll turn it over to Bija in case you want to give a final note.
I would just love to share our ebook with everybody. And if you go to bijab.com, you will be prompted to go to the book section where you put your email in and boom, you get the PDF of the book. So please, that's what it's there for. It's for all of you. And I'd be interested to hear any of your stories if you use the book or, as this goes further. And if it's been helpful, and even if there's something you want to add to it, if there's some other area, I think it'd be really interesting to do some sort of an article or seeing how yoga therapy works in gardening and walking, in whatever, in painting and whatever else you are interested in, or how you've used some of these tools in a creative way with your clients and students. So, but please do get the book because it's available now for free. And thank you so much for this fantastic opportunity and discussion. It was very lively and so much fun. And you really draw me out, drew some of this rock and roll out. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will close this out. I'm just going to let us, come to a place that's nice and comfortable for us, sitting however you feel comfortable. Let's take a couple deep breaths. And let's just finish out together with a nice, so inhale. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. So nice to meet you.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Bye.